first. Monty?
Yeah, here.
Sue is absent. Sue?
Here.
Tamara?
Here.
Giovanna?
Here.
Jim?
Here.
Joining us live via satellite. And I am here. We have a quorum. Would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Are you standing?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for being here, administrators. Thank you for being here on what you thought was your last day, and you're still here in the evening. Thank you for being here. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So
Thank you, Sue.
Second.
Thank you, Monty. All in favor? Jimmy's a yes too, 6-0. We have some recognitions.
We do have some recognitions, quite a few this month. First, I'd like to recognize Mrs. Alexander. She brought a special guest with her tonight. Go ahead, Miss Alexander.
I brought Santa. So he's going to pass out just a little token of Christmas cheer, and he's been our Santa for 14 years. We always take the kids' picture with him, and he comes to the ECC each year, and then we also sometimes we'll adopt families and go to their houses and drop off toys. Other times we've gone to Ronald McDonald House, but we just thought we'd share some Christmas cheer with you guys. So there we go. You can.
First name Santa, last name Claus. Well, we just checking our list. Checked it twice before we came up today.
you're missing out, Jim.
There you go, young man.
Thank you.
Ooh. Thank you, Santa. That's lovely.
Thank you so much.
Monty, what are you gonna do with all that stuff?
You're gonna need help out.
Oh, thank you very much.
No, I mean, I've gotten one of them already.
Please give me chocolate. Please give me chocolate.
I'm just kidding.
She's a chocolate girl.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for
Sorry.
coming. He's been bad.
Do you want me to help you pass out? I'll take the, you can give us the picture for the first row, and I'll go pass you that on the back.
I imagine there's a ton of kids watching your meeting from home.
That's right. Very
Merry Christmas. Even a little
That's lovely.
Thanks, Santa. Thank you.
Nicole. Just keep going. Everybody gets something.
Well,
Thank you, Santa.
thank you, Santa. Very nice.
Thank you, Santa.
Wait, Santa.
There you go.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Bit early, okay?
Get some rest. I got cookies in there. No milk.
We actually had quite a few recognitions this month. With this large list, and being the last day before we went on break, I didn't actually have any students appear tonight, but at some point I'd like to have them come to a board meeting for additional recognition. But we had quite a few this month. Some great accomplishments from our staff and our students. First, our Special Olympics State Bowling Tournament team. We had T.C. Thompson, Leighton Bathgate, Abby Johnson, Samantha Love, and Ronnie McHale were our state Special Olympics bowling team. So I want to congratulate them for qualifying. Our all-state football team, we had Xander Brenniger and Carson Smith. We also had several academic all-state football players, including Landon Chance, Hunter Jones, Carson Smith, Jordan Hall, Logan Hulse, Will Jennings, and Grady Salmon, and Mason Weber. That is the most academic all-state teams in program history. So I want to congratulate and then finally, women's wrestling is a new state-sanctioned sport, and we had our first female wrestler in Oak Grove history, and what a tradition Oak Grove wrestling has. Our first female wrestler to earn a victory is Lauren Phillips. So we'll have them appear at some point later where we can have a smaller audience to give them their well-deserved recognition. So.
Thank you. Next, we have a report from J.E. Dunn. Mr. Catlett.
Okay. Fortunately, I don't have hard copies. So it's fine. That's the one that Paul. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, so thank you for allowing me to come and present to you the bid summary for Phase 2, the complete package. We took bids back in October 21st, I believe it was. We had a really good turnout. We averaged about 4 bids per scope. So here's a list of basically the bids. And talking with the administration, we have in column, I'll just kind of go through the how this is arranged. You guys have seen it before, but so we have column A, which is the scope of work that everybody bid from. We have column B, which is the actual contractor that we would like to award the scope to. C is the number of bids that we received per scope. And then we have column D, which is the original base bid. And then in talking with the administrative and staff, working with Mr. Huffington, we have the alternate 4A, which is the new restrooms at the South Gym. Column G, there's the alternate for the new restrooms at the library, and then our base bid plus all the desired alternates that the school district would like to proceed with. So yes, tonight we are asking for approval to proceed with the award of the contracts to all the trade partners for Phase 2, which is the addition and renovation to the elementary school.
So the alternates, are those in addition to the original base bid? Is that what the
Yes.
alternate is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
There were like 9 of them, original 9 alternates bid. Now,
Correct.
9,
I think it's 11.
8 or 9, 11, whatever. Bunch
A
of them.
lot. And unfortunately, we couldn't fit them all into the budget.
Sure.
And this number we're looking at deducts coming off of this number. Some scopes of work that the district will take on themselves, whatever, to try to get the number down to something under $4.1 million.
So this number may come down from the 4.3.
Yes.
So this is a not to exceed the 4.328. Ideally.
Yes.
In your board packet, under the motions, you should see a single piece of paper because we reworded the actual motion. With that number in there, you'll see the 43,228, 189 or 190, and then the possible deducts of $240,000. That's kind of our anticipated number. I will think as far as deductions. Is that correct, Mr. Tripp? Is that right?
Yes.
In which areas do you see the most likely that the school would be able to perform the work rather than the contractors? Are there certain areas, or is it just sort of throughout the project?
It's throughout. It's, there's some painting in some areas that we would do ourselves teachers' lounge, we'd probably do ourselves, asphalt work, landscaping, some things that just don't have to be done in here, that can be done at a later date.
Any questions? Can't see Jimmy, so I don't hear him, so.
Jim, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
If no questions, I'll entertain a motion and a second to approve J.E. Dunn GMP for Phase 2 bond project in the amount of $4,328,190 with an estimated savings of $240,000 with future deductions as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Monty. Want a second?
A second.
Thank you, Glenn. Got a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
He's raising his hand.
That's everyone. Before we move on to the next part, he's gonna hate me for saying this, but I'd really like to thank Monty, Tripp, and Randy McLean, because they've spent extensive hours working with J.E. Dunn, going to meetings, talking over budget proposals, trying to find ways to reduce costs of their own personal time, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll get to work.
Okay. Not on our agenda, but we have a presentation from Hollis Miller.
Sure.
It's all right.
So I believe in your packets, there is a printout of our latest budget, and what that was doing is really kind of going through everything from phase 1, what we have completed to date, all of those expenses, the construction costs, different allowances, contingencies, things that have been spent, and then the projections for where we are sitting with phase 2. And so it's a full spreadsheet that kind of lists out each phase individually. So you'll see phase 1 with approved change orders as the first vertical column. The second one, there's some pending change orders that could impact that cost a little bit. And so that's why you're seeing that in a second column with kind of that gray tone up at the top. And then the third column represents our phase 2. And those numbers reflect what Jeremy just presented as far as the GMP and the alternates that you're wanting to accept. And it also does have that line item for the $240,000 deductions that we are anticipating to be able to move over into that phase 2 project. So there's lots of pieces that go into the overall budget for a project. So obviously we have the hard cost, and those are our construction costs. And then there's also the soft costs, and just kind of touching base on those again of those represent like the furniture, fixtures, design fees, permits, inspections, all of those side things that are not the physical built component itself, but still has to be tracked within our overall budget. So I know Justin's here and he can run through these a little bit more specifically, line item by line item if you'd like. But we wanted to be able to present that fully to the board so that you could have a full picture of where we are with the bond projects themselves, and kind of a point as we start to now close up phase 1 and move into phase 2.
So I guess just real quick, how detailed would you guys like me to get this evening? I can go as deep as you would like, or I can keep it high level. I'll kind of tailor it to however you guys would like to hear it. So
Is there a middle range?
there probably can be, yeah.
That would be
Yeah.
perfect.
Not
So-
30,000 feet, not 10,000.
Yeah, if I start going too deep, just like start throwing something at me or whatever. So what we wanted to do is show you guys tonight up at the top of the sheet, like Jennifer had said. So we break this out into hard costs and soft costs. So our hard cost, this 17,502,805, that is the GMP that J.E. Dunn brought back to us last year before we started work at the primary and the high school. So, you know, when we talked about the GMP, we have some approved change orders, and then we did a roofing project at this building, and that went into, the hard costs actually went into the phase 1. So because it was work that was done last summer, we covered that in the encumbered costs. So these are costs that you guys have already, either the work has been done or you guys have already paid these out, right? So these are kind of money spent. So that's this column in D and E. So that's the hard cost of 17,502,805, and then you work your way down. We tried to line item this out as best that we could. We've worked with your guys' administration and accounting department to figure out, how much we've encumbered for our FF&E. We have some technology. We have district expenses that have been paid out over 3 years. So those are just other things that we use bond money to cover as the district. We have a Navitas. So remember, Navitas did that performance contract where they upgraded some of our lighting. They did some of our HVAC systems last summer that around the district. So that was this $5.4 million number. And then LJ Hart. So we wanted to cover, make sure that you had your bond company's fees encumbered in this as well. So it's kind of all inclusive. So those are kind of district guided pieces. In 2.1, 2.2, we come down to those professional services that Jennifer has stated. So based on our contracts with you guys, what we've done is we've tried to break this up so you guys can see kind of how that works. And so we have phase 1 fees, phase 2 fees that we'll get to in a second, and then on down through the line. We also wanted to break out things that are not in architect's fees. So architect's fees cover structural, MEP, architectural, those kind of things. There are some other additional costs that we wanted to talk to you guys about. So reimbursable expenses, printing, mileage, those kind of things, those incidentals. We wanted to make sure that those were covered. Right now, those are just a placeholder, about 1%. We do this quite a bit, so we just have a number in there as a placeholder. We did hire a surveyor to come around, survey around the campus and look at the grades and things like that. So when we did some improvements, whether it was the parking lot out at the high school, we knew what the soil conditions were. The civil engineer also charged a fee to do his work, and we broke that down for the high school and the primary so you could kind of see what was spent at each. We did have a kitchen consultant, C&T Vector, that did some work for us at the primary and the high school as well. And then we had some graphics that we had done throughout the district. So those are kind of your design team soft costs. In 2.3, so what we do, it's required by our code, is we hire a testing agency that do third-party testing. They make sure that what we have drawn on our documents is actually what's constructed in the field. So they're kind of our point of contact to make sure that J.E. Dunn's doing what's on the documents and that what we drew, our surveyors, our engineers, signed and sealed with their stamp is being done appropriately. So we had soil borings and some soil testing, geotechnical testing done for $5,000. Private utility locates, because you can't get like dig right to come onto a private property to mark the lines for electrical, water, things like that. So we did have to hire a private utility locate. And then we had special inspections. And special inspections, they test concrete, steel, all the parts of the construction that are load bearing or have special conditions. So they make sure that everything's built right and built safe. Owner contingency, we went ahead and zeroed that out because the projects are pretty much done. And encumbered payments, those will go into the next phase. So that's kind of phase 1, and phase 2 then is what we just went through, and it goes line item by line item for phase 2. So this was high school, primary, middle school, and then this phase over here on columns I and J. If you walk down through that, that would be exactly the same thing for these phase 2 projects that we just approved for the elementary school. So again, this is kind of what we were asking for this evening from J.E. Dunn, as that GMP, which you guys just voted on. And then you can see how that trickles down through the rest of the soft cost in terms of our professional fees. We had some alternates that we did design for. I think it's important to note that the way we break out our fee is you guys are paying us to design everything, but if we didn't take the alternate, we're not charging you to do construction administration on the things that weren't accepted. We're not doing that work. We're not looking at those things to be installed because we didn't accept those. So we make sure that we take those out of the final fee so that we're not kind of double dipping. And then again, we had some soils testing, some private utility locates, and we have our third-party special inspections to do on this next phase as well. So that brings us down to a total of $30,172,798 for what we're showing as total approved phase 1 and phase 2 budget. So if you guys remember, and we'll kind of go over this at the bottom as well. So our bond amount, what the school district went for, was $22,500,000. We had premium bonds, so when you sell bonds, sometimes they'll fight over who gets to buy those, right? So you guys get a little bit of a premium. So per LJ Hart, you guys got $3.6 million worth of premium bonds, which when you add those two together, we say our total bond budget was 26,117,815. So that would be hard costs and soft costs total. All the money that you guys had to work with was $26,117,000. So currently, you'll notice that there is a delta here. And so we have a delta of about $4 million over budget currently.
Which essentially matches what we just approved.
Yes, yes.
And the $4 million will be made up in a limited, what am I trying to say?
Lease purchase.
Lease purchase
Yeah.
on the Navitas project.
Yeah. Yeah.
You guys do a lot of different projects. Are you seeing them go this far over budget in the other projects?
Recently, I can say yes.
Recently, yes.
Yes. Yeah. I can give some very specific examples, but bid an elementary school out 2 weeks ago, and we had hoped it would come in at $26 million, and it came in at $30 million. So, I mean, $4 million over their estimated budget, almost the exact same numbers that we're seeing here overall total. So we're seeing some very high prices right now and some very long lead times on items, and it's kind of simple supply and demand. Things that we used to be able to get a year ago in 2 or 3 weeks, they would arrive on site after we made the phone call to order it. Now takes 6, 7, 8, sometimes 9 months. And a lot of our subs are not holding their pricing. So they may hold their pricing for 2 or 3 weeks, where they used to hold it for 45, maybe 60 days so that we could work through some things. Now, you know, they're just afraid to hold prices. And I understand it. I'll give you an example. Roofing materials right now are very hard to come by. They're very expensive. And the manufacturers will not commit to those subcontractors who are calling them to bid those items what it will be. So they'll tell them today's price is this, but we're gonna get you a ticket and invoice for when you pick it up in 6, 8, 7, 9 months, right? So it might cost $1 today, but it could be $3 in 9 months when you go pick it up. And it's a risk on the contractor's side to bid projects at this point. So a lot of those guys that are bidding projects, like Jeremy said, you know, we had 4 bidders per package. A lot of those guys are taking a risk and, you know, bidding on projects so that they can keep, you know, the lights on, people working. But sometimes they don't know what those actual material costs are gonna be until, you know, several months down the road.
Is there any contingency in there for if prices go down for us to recoup any of that?
So did we index any of our information or our stuff here? I don't know.
No, we didn't.
No. So we did not do that on this one. One thing that we have done, and I've done this in one district now, is we started to index materials, which means everybody bids apples to apples on bid day. And if that price goes up, the district pays that price later, or if it goes down, they could get that money back. We typically do that for asphalt, and that's usually about the only one we regularly do that on, because oil prices fluctuate almost daily, weekly. We've never had to do that before on other trade packages like we are now. Never had to index roofing materials, never had to index steel before. But it's something that we're kind of doing now, or starting to do on a limited basis, just because a lot of those contractors are not comfortable taking the risk. If it's $100,000 more, they eat that cost, you know, so.
So we don't get a benefit, we're kind of protected on the high side.
Right, right. It's kind of that risk reward. They could come back with their handout later for a check if it was indexed, if it was more. But on these, they did take, those subcontractors did take the risk on this, and this is, like we said, that, you know, hopefully not to exceed number, right?
Any questions? Entertain a motion and a second to approve the report by House Miller.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Are you in favor of the report? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's 6-0. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just so you know, Jim, I have the camera facing flipped to the audience, but we can see you, or at least I can.
Sort of. Another presentation from Westbrook and Associates. Hi.
All right. Thank you all for letting me join your meeting tonight to just go over some highlights of the audit report. I won't take up too much of your time. We can just kind of follow along on my presentation, and then I'd be glad to answer any questions you guys might have. I'm Mandy Coolin, and I'm one of the district's auditors. I'll start out here with our audit opinion. Here's where we state that the financial statements were presented fairly, so it's an unmodified or a clean audit opinion. So that's always a great place to start. On the next slide here, we can see the district's statement of activities for the year ended June 30th of 2021. So to the far left, you'll see expenditures broken down by function for total expenditures of about $35.5 million. Then to the right of those expenditures are any program revenues that come in to offset those expenditures. So this is going to be any charges for services, any operating or capital grants and contributions. And then to the far right, we have net expenditures of about $32.3 million. Just know that then your general revenues are coming in to offset those expenditures. So your basic formula, property tax, sales tax, those other general revenues which aren't presented on this slide. On the next page here, we can see the district's balance sheet. So we can see total cash balances for the year broken down by fund for total fund balances of $16.75 million. And then in the notes to the financial statements, on the next slide here, we can see that there's some additional detail as far as what makes up those fund balances. So you'll see in the general fund, there was about $319,000 that was set aside for student activities, about $168,000 for food service, and then at the bottom, we have unassigned of about $1.9 million in the general fund, which would be left over to cover the district's general operating expenditures. In the debt service fund, those funds of $2.6 million were restricted for future debt payments. And then in the capital projects funds, we have about $10.5 million of unspent bond proceeds as of year end. And then the remaining capital projects fund balance is committed. And so these are additional projects that have been approved prior to year end but haven't been completed or paid for. Then we have the district's statement of revenue, expenditures, and change in fund balance. So this kind of gives us the big picture for the year. We can see total revenues at the top there, broken down by source and by fund, for total revenues of about $25.8 million. Now, on the Hollis presentation, they mentioned the premium on bonds that you guys had received. That's going to be in the capital projects fund. If you look at that very top line, local revenue of about $3.4 million, that's where you'll see that premium on bonds that the district had received. In the middle section here, we have expenditures broken down by fund and by function. So all the way to the right, we can see total expenditures of about $35.5 million. And then if we keep going down, you'll see district transfers. And then about the fifth line from the bottom is the $20 million proceeds from the sale of bonds. So that's for your Series 20 and 2021 bonds. We have boxed in red here, net change in fund balances. So we can see that for the year in total, fund balances increased about $10.2 million. The biggest contributor of that being the capital projects funds and those bond proceeds that the district received. In the notes to the financial statements, we can see the district's debt balances. So we can see the $20 million of additions for the bonds, any retirements, and then amounts due within the next year on those bonds. Then we like to show a few graphs so that we can see some district trends. This shows us a 5-year historical trend of the district, so you can see how revenues shook out from year to year. If we look at 2021 in the first column and then look at the graphs below, we'll see that local revenue jumped up, and that was again due to the bond premiums that the district received. If we go down to federal revenue, you'll see a spike there. That was expected with all of the CARES money and additional federal funds that the district has received. And then on the next slide, we show the same sort of information with expenditures. You can see a 5-year trend of how expenditures shook out from year to year. And about the middle of the slide, you'll see the 2021 totals, and it looks like expenditures were up about $15 million. We can see in the capital projects fund, that makes sense. Your capital outlay was about $12 million, so we would expect that to increase since we had the bond proceeds coming in. And then on the next slide, we show just a couple of trends. The top graph here shows district reserves. So you can see that as of June 30th of 2021, reserves were just about 13%. So they had dipped down a little bit from previous years. And then on the average daily attendance, that number dropped about 117 or so students down to about 1,803. The decrease to ADA was expected. We've seen that at all of our districts across the board just because of the different ways that attendance had to be tracked last year. Now that we're more in person and out of the virtual and hybrid learning model, we would expect that to trend back up next year. During our audit, we look at compliance with state statutes, specifically over budget, purchasing, attendance, transportation, and there were a couple of instances of non-compliance that are reported in the audit. Now you'll see on the second paragraph here that they are immaterial to the financial statements. The first couple were in regards to budget. When we look at the original budget that gets approved, state statute has some specific requirements that are required to be included in that. One of them being a comparative document that shows the prior 2-year revenues and expenditures. And when we looked at the original budget, that component wasn't in there. So we've sent a checklist to the district to help with that going forward, that it's the same checklist we use just to go sure and make sure that all of those state statute components are met. And the next one is also in regards to budget. In the general fund and the capital projects fund, we had a couple of instances where we noticed that actual expenditures exceeded budget amounts. Sometimes there's unforeseen circumstances that aren't budgeted, and so we just would recommend that this get reviewed throughout the year, and especially at the end of the year, and that a budget amendment be put in place if needed.
Can I ask a question about
Yeah.
that? So, I think it's normal that you would have budget fluctuations. So does state statute say you have to have an exact match in your budget to actual expenditures, or is there a percentage?
No, so state statute doesn't say that you have to have an exact match. It just says that you can't spend more than budgeted. That's all the statute says. Now, we have a few districts that will amend the budget to actual, and this district, I'm not sure, may have done it in previous years, but we have some that do, not a lot, but when we see that the budget has been amended to actual, we look at it and we're like, well, state statute doesn't say that you can't do that, but we wouldn't recommend it, because then you're just kind of losing the history of the budget and you don't get to see, where did we miss the boat. So state statute doesn't prohibit that. It just says don't spend more than you budget. So we say don't amend to actual, but still look at that, and if you have a big project or something that wasn't anticipated, then amend for that specific project.
So more like add a line rather than add dollars into a current budget line.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And when the financial reports print, there's a way to, what we look at is just go down the line and we can see budget and actual right there. And so central office could run that to see if there's any lines that are out of whack that need to be adjusted. And then with transportation, when we audit transportation, we look at the application for state transportation aid that gets reported to DESE, and then we trace the numbers on that back to the underlying documentation. And when we had looked at it, there were several changes that had to be made to ridership and mileage. So that has since been corrected, and we talked about the district about those reporting procedures. So that's what this finding was about, was changes to the transportation application. And then the next one is with attendance. Same sort of information. When we're auditing attendance, we look to see what's been reported to the state, and then we trace that back to the attendance software and all of the underlying documents. And so there were some errors with the 2 reports reconciling. Again, that was not unexpected this year, because there were a lot of manual calculations that had to be involved with attendance, where usually there's not. And the district also had some new staff in this area. But we had talked to the attendance staff with this, and she really did a great job getting it turned back around to us once she kind of had a grasp on what was needed. So that's been corrected. That's what that finding is in regards to. And then we look at internal controls. If you look at our report, it'll say that we don't provide an opinion on internal controls, but we do analyze them to help us determine the scope of our audit and any risk areas. And we did report a material weakness with regards to segregation of duties. This was in regards to cash disbursements, when you have district staff who is able to add vendors and create and approve POs and cut checks, we would just recommend that there be some segregation of those functions so you don't have one person doing all of that, even though that may not be their primary job responsibility. We just don't want the access to be there. And then we've added to that comment, we looked at cash receipts also, and we found that buildings are taking deposits to central office to then go to the bank. That just adds another layer of hands on a deposit, so we would really recommend the buildings just take their deposits to the bank. But if it does come to central office, we would want it to go to somebody other than the person who's managing the general ledger and doing the bank reconciliations. So we kind of talked about this in our audit exit conference, and I know that central office has some ideas to start splitting these functions. So we'll look at that again next year. We also looked at internal controls over federal programs, and we didn't report any issues of noncompliance there. We audited food service as our major program this year, and there were no instances of noncompliance over the federal programs that we reported. This is just kind of a summary of what I've talked about. The financial statements had an unmodified opinion, or otherwise a clean audit opinion. We reported a segregation of duties, material weakness, but there was no findings over any federal program. And then at the bottom here, where it says, is the auditee qualified as a low-risk auditee, and that says no, I always just like to point that out. 95% of school districts are cash basis, so you report the revenue you receive and the checks that are paid. The uniform guidance over federal programs just says when an organization is cash basis, they can't be considered low risk, and all this means is that 40% of your federal programs have to be audited. So it's nothing to be alarmed about, it's just a bigger threshold for auditing. Then we talked about that. We can go on to the next slide. This is the start of our required communications letter. So here is where we would report any general recommendations or just best practices or other things we may have seen throughout the audit. User permissions, we talked about this a little bit last year, and this kind of goes in hand with the segregation of duties comment, but we've recommended that the district do a scrub of their software to make sure that people have the correct permissions in the software. So you wouldn't want administrators to have access to modify attendance. You wouldn't want people other than payroll and HR to have payroll functions. So this going through the software and doing a scrub will help also segregate that to make sure that people only have access to what they need.
And that's important because, for example, the attendance is a revenue generator, so you don't want individuals to be able to manipulate.
Exactly. Anybody who would benefit from that, we wouldn't want to have them access or have access to manipulate it. This was also a comment from last year. This is a GASB 54, or a governmental accounting standards policy that is required for governmental organizations. This just says that we have a hierarchy of spending. We have funds that are restricted for specific purposes or assigned or committed, and the district is already following this policy. It just hasn't been formally adopted. So MSBA has a policy out there for all school districts to adopt. That's what this comment is about. So we would just recommend that you get that and just, like I said, it's already what you're doing. It's just a matter of formalizing it as part of your board policies.
So you said GASB?
Yeah. Yep, GASB number 54. And then required reports. This was a state statute that was implemented last year, and so you probably saw this in your report last year also. But state statute says that districts must post their financial information at least quarterly in a searchable format. And when we went to the district's website, we saw where this hadn't been reported yet. I did let the administrative staff know about a supplementary software that works with the district's current software that some of our other schools use, and it's really cool. It's just like a side program to the Suspend software, and that goes in and generates the reports for them and posts them to their website. And I'm not sure what the cost is, but one of our other Suspend districts uses it, and it's really handy and user-friendly. So I recommended that the district check into that. But we'll just want to make sure that you're getting that posted so that the district is compliant with state statute. And then just a couple of others. During our audit of payroll, we also, just like we do attendance and transportation and look at the underlying documents, we trace employee payroll contracts, and we pick a sample of some payments to test the taxes and retirement and withholdings and just make sure that they all agree to the supporting documentation. And we found that for some of the employees selected for testing, there weren't any W-4s on file. This is what governs how much and taxes should be withheld. And so we would just recommend an internal audit. January is usually a good time to get those forms back on file, and if the employee's payroll files don't include this information, that they get a new form on file. And then the second component of this, the second thing on payroll, we had a couple of instances where there were a couple payments for extra duties that weren't included on a salary schedule. State statute says the board has to approve all payments regardless of the amount, and it's really hard to do that, but we just want to, do the best we can. And so with salary schedules and pay items, it's usually pretty easy to be in compliance with that by just throwing it on a salary schedule. So as contracts are being renewed and people are getting, payments for tutoring or summer school pay, you just want to refer back to the salary schedules and make sure that there's a line item for it on there. And then the last comment here, when we looked at purchasing, we looked at compliance with the district's purchasing policy. We tested 11 different expenditures. One of them was required to have competitive bids or quotes, and we didn't see that had happened with that purchase. The other one was a purchase for more than $50,000, so sealed bids would have been required, and in that instance, it didn't appear that sealed bids were obtained. So there weren't any issues with state compliance or state statute because they weren't related to construction projects, but this would just be in compliance with the district's policy. So we just want to recommend that purchasing agents are getting quotes and bids, and we know that sometimes it's an emergency or sole source, or there's different situations. So if that's the case, the key is just documentation, and we want to make sure that they're including that with the invoice that says, whatever the circumstance it was, so that, or why it wasn't bid. But that concludes my presentation. So I know that was a super fast overview, but do you guys have any questions for me?
On the bid piece, is it possible that we're just not record keeping correctly? In other words, maybe we got bids, but the records weren't kept?
It could be, but we did give the district an opportunity to provide those, and so I don't think that they were, or it could be that they weren't kept, but they weren't able to be located. So. Well, it was a really tough audit year with federal programs and for attendance, so across the board it's been more work for all of our districts, so we really appreciate central office and Tom and Shelley and the team there on getting everything turned around to us, and we had to ask for a lot more information as COVID has caused more work across all lines this year, but it was definitely a harder audit for federal programs and attendance, so we just really appreciate everybody's help in getting everything to us quickly. So.
I don't know that I necessarily have a question, more of a commentary. I think, hearing it through, and I want to dig in deeper. Particularly, I know the immaterial findings, but the material findings, of course, are of concern, and I would like for us to have an action plan for addressing, as well as some of this commentary about processes. And I know you're talking about segregation of duties, but I think just having a deeper dive into the plan for some of these processes would be helpful.
And as you do that, just know that the material weakness, that's the highest level. It means, okay, this could happen and it would go unnoticed because there's no mitigating controls in place. But below that is a significant deficiency, which means, okay, this could happen, but we have XYZ in place, so we would probably catch it. Below that is just a control deficiency where it shows up on the required communications. Or once enough controls are in place and duties are separated, it could come out eventually. So just to kind of give you an idea, but I think that will get better as you come up with a plan on splitting responsibilities.
Right.
And that's something we would be glad to help with also.
Well, and it's always more difficult when you have a smaller central office because you have fewer people to segregate the duties. But it sounds like you've offered just some things just around building to central office that we could look at a little bit more deeply. But I think also just the awareness that there could be this difficulty because there is a smaller staff or something to call out to just make sure that it's focused on.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other questions? Comments?
Okay, thank you guys so much.
I'll entertain a motion in a second to approve the audit report as presented. Thank you, Sue. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jen. All in favor? Is everyone?
Yes, I invited Brett Thompson Brent Thompson from Apple Bus to come. He's our new director here recently. Just wanted him to stop by, give you a quick update on Apple Bus and introduce him.
Hi everybody, I've met some of you guys. I met some of y'all too. Talked to some of you on the phone. First off, I'd like to say thank you for approving the pay raise for the drivers. That's helped a lot with keeping the good drivers we've got and bringing in some new drivers. Since I got here, right after I got my license, I started driving. My regional manager was driving, my mechanic was driving. I'm happy to know that all three of us are off the road, and we are opening up a route on the 4th whenever we come back to school. So one more route to open, and I have 5 drivers currently in qualifications, on top of 3 teachers to help out with trips and stuff like that, because we do have several early trips that are running at the same time as routes are going. Obviously our routes are coming priority, but we're doing everything to make sure, whether I hop on a bus to cover a route and one of my drivers takes a trip, we're getting them all rolling. So, I do really appreciate that. We've got a really good team here, and we continue to grow. I've been here 2 months now, a little over 2 months. So we've been making lots of changes, to get you guys information quicker. Mileage reports, the last one for November, we sent first day of December. I had it ready to go, and it's a day-by-day mileage instead of, here's how many mileage, and you can look at it day by day and see what we're driving, where they're going trip-wise, what's being used for maintenance and stuff like that for every single bus in our entire fleet, not just, overall. It's everything individualized. And we're going to continue to do that with ridership as well. My drivers are writing down who's riding, who's not riding daily. Currently working on the TransFinder system, getting it updated. We've got all the kids geocoded now in the system. So now it's assigning them into the routes, making sure the ones that are actually riding are on there. And the ones that aren't, we're going to work on over the Christmas break. I'll still be in the office every day, getting them off the list and stuff like that. So I have a more accurate list for every bus route that we've got. So we're just trying to, it's been kind of a back and forth over there from what I've heard over the last few years. So I'm trying to get it balanced up and brought up and everyone on board. So, moving forward, everything goes smoothly. So that's the majority of what I got. Any questions I can answer for you guys?
You've got 5 being trained and qualified right now?
Yeah, I'm waiting on some backgrounds, waiting on them to get permits, things like that. It's not the fastest process, because once they get their permit, and it's, we're dependent on them to take the test and get their permit. We'll help them train when they come in. But once they get their permit, it's a minimum of a 2-week time frame before they can actually test for their CDL at that point. So, they come in, backgrounds are coming back in a day or two. If they're studying, Coach Adams, he came through and got his permit in no time. And as soon as we're done with that, they go for their UA, physicals, and all that kind of stuff, and all that comes back quick before they even get a test date. So really, it is up to them to get the permit, and then we get rolling 2 weeks. As soon as they give me that permit, I schedule a test 2 weeks out. So, and we do also have we're full on monitors. We got all those, and I have 2 additional ones in qualifications right now to help out. I know something we had talked about is getting some extra monitors to help out on some of the buses that have an issue here or there. Just if we know we have an issue on a bus, I can throw a monitor on there, or a backup monitor for one of our sped buses that is required to have a monitor. So I do have 2 of those. One of those is scheduled to start on Monday. The other one probably about a week after, or the 4th, and one about a week after that. So I will have extra monitors to hop on buses that we have a little issues with, or as backups.
Perfect. Thank you for the report. It's nice to have some positive news and some organization, and hopefully let us all kind of take a deep breath over all this. So it sounds like you got us moving in the right direction.
So far, so good. We're going to keep it rolling. So thanks again for having me here, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Need a motion and a second to approve the Apple Bus presentation.
So moved.
Monty? You want a second?
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor? That's everyone. Special education presentation.
Hi guys, how are you?
Hello.
Hi there. I just wanted to give you guys some updates, kind of what's been going on our first semester and some statistics. Let me put on my old lady glasses here. We've had a total of 18 transfers come in. With students with IEPs, we've had 27 referrals. I don't know that has ever been, that data has ever been collected in the past, but I would like to keep collecting that data so that we have something to look back in the past. Our current outside placements, we have 5 students that are in outside placement, and we just did our child count, and we have 271 students on IEPs in our district. We recently have applied for the High Needs Fund. For the 2021 school year, we should be getting back around $38,000. Our public placement fund for last year, around $21,000. We are still working on the local tax effort. Mr. Uppington and I have been looking at that. We don't think our school district has ever billed other districts for that, so we are working on that because that's revenue that we could be bringing in. So we're working with Claim Care and to get case managers on board. From last year, we found that we had 8 foster care students in our district. So we should be billing those districts where their biological parents live for tuition. We get billed. I get those bills, so we should be billing as well. So we're working on that. I know compliance was a big issue last year. Our response plan correction was approved by DESE late October. Our individual correction action plans were due by the end of this month. All of it was submitted today. And our evidence of correction is due by April 1st, so then we'll start working on that. Another change that we're making is our software. We use the SIS program right now. With talking with teachers, they get really frustrated with that program as far as paperwork goes. Paperwork is such a huge component of special education, and it takes a lot of their time. It's not very user-friendly, and I believe some of our compliance issues come from that, just such as dates and stuff were included, and it doesn't talk to each other really, really well. So I contracted a program called SpedTrack. Most of our neighboring districts use that. That would also be beneficial for us because when we get transfers, right now our teachers are having to type everything into our system. If we use SpedTrack like everyone else, they're already in. So that's one less thing that teachers have to do. I did a little negotiation with them. They have waived their implementation fee. And so the change of cost would only be $745 a year. And that's already in my budget. I just kind of moved some things around. So, and then we're also gonna add a 504 component to that because right now we don't have any. All of our buildings are using different forms for our 504, and so there's no consistency across buildings, and it's not electronic. So that will also be a nice user-friendly piece as well. I did a survey for pairs recently. I had 22 out of 24 respond. I just kind of wanted to let you know how they were feeling. Professional development, 50% of them said they would like more training and understand the different disabilities in which they work with. So I'm working on that to provide some training for them at some point. The other thing that they said they needed training on was de-escalating behaviors, instructional strategies, and meeting the needs of lower performing students. So I'm working on that as well. I just asked them how their work experience was going in the classroom this year, and 5 being the highest, and 50% of them said 5. So that's really impressive because sometimes pairs don't really, they are underpaid and they have hard jobs, and so I was really happy with those results. I also asked them what were some of the important factors to retain them. 2 of the ones that came up the most were higher wages. 68% of them gave that a 5. And benefits offered, said 54% of them would like that as well. So just some information for you. The next survey I would like to do is I would like to start surveying our regular education staff just to see what questions they have about special education or concerns they have. I would like to do some sort of professional development with them in the future. SpedTrack will probably get implemented and training will be our February PD date. So maybe March, April meet with regular education as well. That was a lot of information. Do you guys have any questions for me?
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
One, you talked about 271 IEPs in the district.
Mm-hmm.
How are those dispersed throughout the various buildings?
I don't have that with me, but I can get it to you.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't bring that with me. Yeah, I don't think I brought that with me.
Matriculation.
Yeah, no, we have that. I can bring it. I can get it to you.
Okay, and then with SpedTrack, you said it's a change in cost of $745. What's the overall cost of that?
So currently our cost is $3,485. SpedTrack would be $4,240.
Okay, I was just asking because one of the findings that we had was around bidding and contracting, and so if it is a sole source, I would recommend just writing up that it's a sole source software to be utilized and why you're using it, so we have that documentation.
Perfect. Will do.
How does the 271 rack up with other school districts? I mean,
As far as
You
this
have an
year,
idea?
for that December count that we just put in yet, I don't know yet, because that was just submitted December 15th. Desi should be getting that out to us shortly, what that will look like all across the district. So when that information comes out from Desi, I'll get it to you.
yeah, I'm just concerned.
Yeah,
about
based
what kind
on
of percentage.
population percentage-wise, yeah. Yeah. It's a good question.
It
But-
sounds like a lot to me. But I have a clue, so.
Yeah, it's quite a few. It's a big portion. Yeah. Yep.
With the coming changes for SIS, did we look at the 360 module of 360 or not?
We did, but it's the same. It just basically 360 does not even have the component that the old version has. So SPED teachers are still using that older classic version of it.
Well, the 360 is coming out next year. I didn't know if you even looked at that at all.
I have not looked at that. The reason we looked at Sped Track, one reason is because a lot of our teachers were familiar with it because they worked in other districts, and two, almost 100% of the districts around us use it. Yeah, we're the only ones in this area that don't use it. And so it would be very helpful, like I said, when we transfer or we're sending documents to other districts, that we all have the same system program. And it's so much more user-friendly.
Do you actually build the IEPs in SpedTrack then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it has like a tech system that I can put all kinds of stuff in where it has drop-down boxes and they can just plug it in. They don't have to type all that out.
Yeah.
And that, another thing I think will help with compliance is that it will have the exact language and verbiage that we need to be using.
And does
as
it
well.
like force date entry? So you have
Yes.
to actually put the
Mhm.
dates in before you can leave?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Yep.
Any other questions
Yes.
for Nicole?
Okay, thanks guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Entertain a motion and a second to approve the special education presentation. Thank you, Sue. Do I have a second? Cameron, thank you. A motion and a second. All in favor? Thank you. Everyone. We need to approve the consent agenda items. Thank you, Sue. And a second.
Second.
All in favor? Everyone? Presentation of the 2022-2023 school calendar.
Okay, for the school calendar, that's on page 103 of your board packet. I actually surveyed staff in advance before we gave them a chance to review a couple of different calendars, and I just asked them what their priorities were. Priorities for a large portion of our staff was to have 2 full weeks over winter break, a full week of spring break, and their PD days. We kind of strategically placed those that fit in good places on calendars instead of just one Monday a month. Those were the things that really the staff wished for, so I actually developed 3 different calendar versions with all of those components built in, and then set that out. The teachers voted on that and came back with the winner being version 2. Version 2, what the difference is in version 2 is they wanted to start winter break a little earlier than what we had. For example, we went to school yesterday and today. We would actually start the last day of our fall semester would be Friday, December 16th. We would take the next 2 weeks as winter break. I'd like to thank the teachers that pointed this out to me. Monday, January 2nd is actually observed for New Year's Day, so we adjusted our calendar slightly. So you'll see Monday, January 2nd is also part of winter break because that is a federal holiday. Spring break in March, actually we moved that back. We moved that back 2 weeks, and what that was is we wanted to coincide with Fort Osage CTC, because what was happening is all of our kids that go to CTC, they couldn't take our spring break because they had to go to CTC. They couldn't take Fort Osage spring break because they had to come to school here because they're part days. So we just coordinated that. I contacted Fort Osage, and that's their spring break, so that's why we moved spring break back. Part of the DESI stipulation when you formulate your district calendar is you must build in 36 hours of snow days. So that's why we actually have 5 full days built into our calendar. So next year, our first 5 snow days are already in the calendar. There won't be any changes. Days 6 and day 7 will be full makeups, along with day 8 and day 9. That's you make up 1 snow day for every 2 days you're out. And then that would make our last possible date of attendance, so families and staff can start to plan their summer activities. Last possible date would be Thursday, that should be Saturday, I need to correct that, would be Friday, May 26th would be our last possible date of attendance, so families can start making plans.
So weird to see 2023 on there.
Yeah, the only thing that has not been set yet is graduation. We don't have a firm date on graduation yet, but I believe that's due to trying to make a contract with our building for graduation, so. Homecoming is Friday, October 7th. That'll be a half day with all the festivities, correct, Coach Selke? PD days are kind of for example, Tuesday, November 8th, that is actually a PD day. I know that color didn't turn out very well on your calendar, but that's actually a PD day because the election board uses our gymnasium for elections, and that creates a significant safety issue if we've got kids in class and people from the community coming in and voting, so we're gonna make election day a PD day. And we try and do that throughout the calendar with our professional development. We did go back to a Thursday start. Our staff they felt that starting school with 2 days, giving the kids a break before you get into a full week, because if you start on a Monday, you go a full week with kids, it's pretty exhausting on the students, so they want to go back to when we started on Thursday, so you'll see that change also.
Does this calendar allow for the same amount of PD days as what you've been able to do this year? Is it the same?
Yes, we have, there's actually, it's rounded a little bit, there's about 9.5 PD days, work days in there, which is consistent with what we've done in the past.
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Ronnie. Have a second?
I'll second that motion with just the change of the last possible date noted on the.
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right. Just.
Have a motion, a second. Any other questions or comments?
When we build our calendar, do we actually compare this to other neighboring districts on total number of days that student contacts and teacher contracts?
Yes, we do. We look at other districts. Our days are slightly longer than most districts. Most districts have student days of 168 days. We've lengthened our day by 15 minutes. We did that 2 years ago, so we have 162 days. 161 and a half. We have 160 full days and 3 half days is what we have. So really 163 student days.
Any other comments or questions? Have a motion and a second. All in favor? Everyone, thank you.
Thank you.
There's nothing else on the agenda. I would like to let everybody know that we do expect to make a formal announcement on our new superintendent this Thursday. So look for that announcement then. Seeing nothing else on the agenda, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Monty.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Have a great vacation.